All right, welcome back to the Superlite Coupe build, everybody. In this video, we are going to pressure test the fuel tank, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the logic and the reasoning behind wanting to pressure test the fuel tank. You know, I did add a removable panel, so we do have access to that tank just in case. But it really is a royal pain to remove this tank after the fact. I mean, you have a couple things going on. Basically, you have the shifter cables that go through this area, so we'd have to detach the shifter cables from the shifter and pull them back through. I may have the parking brake cables hooked up to an electric actuator come through that area as well, so I'd have to, pull those cables through. The other thing is I'm going to cover this tank with Damplifier Pro, which is like a butyl rubber substrate. And if the tank needs some welding, we don't want to do that after the fact. It's really difficult to get that butyl welding off. So we just want to provide some extra due diligence here and make sure nothing leaks. The other thing is I had some custom work on the tank to put this this stock GM fuel pump in. So we have some custom welding here and here and here and around there. There's a bung down in the corner. We need to add a plug there, and then I added some welding for these rollover valves or vent valves, and then we have to make sure that the fuel sender doesn't leak. So we're going to cover all this in the video and show you how we pressure test it. If that's of interest to you, stick around. All right, well, before we get to pressure testing, we're basically going to wash the tank out. So I took all the components out, but I put a plug in the corner here. So I'm just going to add some water and slosh it around. I did some cutting of these fittings, so there's probably some aluminum dust in the tank, and don't want the filter in the fuel pump to clog up with that kind of stuff. Okay, well, lo and behold, we do have a bunch of crud in here, so obviously a good thing to do. It is recommended in the builder manual, but I've got some different holes here I can inspect. But anyway, I'm going to finish this up and then we'll bring the tank inside. All right, so it's time to get to work here. I'll just quickly walk you through some of the supplies I purchased. So I have this 1/2-inch NPT plug. Since I have the in-tank fuel pump, I don't need to hook a fitting up. So I bought this. It's aluminum. I also bought this as a thread sealer. It's called Gasolia E-Seal, and it's specifically formulated for ethanol fuels. Apparently a lot of the fuel-safe thread sealants and gasket sealants don't do too well with ethanol. I actually had this product. I bought it a while ago. I forgot I had it. And it's also a PTFE sealer, which is like the Gasoila. And this says it's fuel safe, so who the heck knows? I probably could have used this and I'd be fine. Plus, that plug is easily reachable, so I could always replace it. But I'm going to use this on the thread, and then for the fuel sender, I've got some 8 32nd bolts, and I'll either use some thread sealer or some Loctite. Blue Loctite apparently is fuel safe. Then to plug up these vent valves, I just got some Spears plugs, and this is really the secret to the test. So I actually was sent this by a vendor on eBay. I didn't even order it. I ordered a silicone elbow, and this is what they sent me, and they never wanted it back. But it's an aluminum cap with a air stem on it, so I could just use a tire pump, and I have a gauge on the tire pump, air pump. So I'm going to connect this via the silicone elbow to the back of the fuel tank and pump 5 pounds of pressure in it. Okay, so we're going to button up the fuel tank, and then we're going to pressure test it to 5 foot-pounds, and we'll see if it holds air. Okay, well, we're pressure testing now. I didn't put hose clamps on this stuff just to see if it would hold any pressure. If feeling this is sort of where the air is coming out of. It's coming out of the screw areas. I could actually feel it. I'm going to put a little soapy water on it and see what happens. Okay, well that's the culprit. I had a feeling. I'm going to shut this off. Okay. All I did was tighten these down. Not a lot, just sort of finger tighten them. I was just sort of curious. But the air is actually coming up through the threads in the bung, so it needs some type of thread sealant. The manual recommends using blue Loctite. So that's, I'll either use that or some thread sealer. I guess I'll go with the Loctite. But I'm just not surprised. I mean, when you look at the more modern seals, I mean, you have an O-ring here with the press fitting. Here you have an O-ring and this sort of locking cap. And then here you have a bunch of bolts that go into the tank. I mean, with the cork, you know, with the cork rubber gasket, you know, it's no wonder it's going to leak a little bit. But we're going to seal those screws up, and then I'm going to torque them down according to spec, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, well, building a kit car is really a lesson in controlling your frustration. So I went to torque down the recommended bolts, and the recommended bolts, I'll show you these, you know, they're not very big. They're 8/32 inch or 8/32 bolts. But anyway, they get torqued to 15 inch-pounds, and sure enough, you know, they just stripped. And you know, you saw all the air coming out through those holes, so the threads weren't very tight. That's for sure. And there's not a lot of excess aluminum around the holes on the bung, but I was able to thread M5 threads into the bung. So I installed the sender. I torqued it down to 15 inch-pounds, which really isn't much. I used blue Loctite, so we're going to let this dry for a day, and then we'll see if that does the trick. Okay, well, this may be a little anticlimactic, but I took the air pump, I pumped it up to 5 psi, which really just moving the dial a little bit, but it is holding air. I had one little leak around here, and I just straightened this band out and tightened it up, and it appears, you know, all these hold 5 psi without any hose clamps, which is what that tube's on pretty tight. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait overnight, and then I'll just see if there's air still in the tank, and then I think we're good to go. I thought I would use this tire gauge to double check the amount of pressure, but it doesn't seem to move. Maybe it's just not that sensitive. It should be able to read 5 psi, but I don't want to put any more air in this tank than necessary. The manual does state no more than 5 psi, so you don't want to cause a leak by putting too much pressure in it. Okay, so tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, if I still have a bit of air pressure in the tank, I'm going to consider this a success. All right, so it's a couple days later. We're going to see if the fuel tank is still holding air. I'm just going to release some air here. That is the sound of success. All right. Well, I'm really happy that the fuel tank holds air and is leak free. We had a little bit of a hiccup or challenge with the fuel sender, but we got past that. Let's see, other than that, I think we're ready to go. All right, so we're going to call it a wrap. As always, thanks for watching and take care.